22 minutes. It's Pete Allen with Five Live Daily, and devoting this part of the programme to one topic in particular. We're trying to give you the facts about an issue which you'll hear mentioned in the news, but we don't normally explain in any way. And we're going to look at Sharia law. Before the election, Home Secretary Theresa May said a future Conservative government would review Sharia courts as part of a crackdown on extremism.
We know enough to know we have a problem, but we do not yet know the full extent of the problem. There is evidence of women being divorced under Sharia law and left in penury. Wives who are forced to return to abusive relationships because Sharia councils say a husband has a right to chastise. And Sharia councils giving the testimony of a woman only half the weight of the testimony of a man.
So we'll look at those proposals. We're trying to find out what Sharia law is, how it might fit into the current legal system. Does it really discriminate against women? And a crucial question, is it compatible with what Theresa May describes as fundamental British values? First of all, I thought we should try and work out what we're talking about here. We have Sadakat Kadri, I've got a whole series of guests, but Sadakat is the first I'm going to introduce because he's a barrister, a Muslim barrister. Wrote something called the Heaven on Earth, A Journey Through Sharia Law. How do you define Sharia law, Sadakat?
Well, I started writing my book a couple of years ago. When I started, I actually had no idea what Sharia law was. What I found actually surprised me as well. What we tend to think of is that it regulates gender relations, for example, and criminal law. But actually, Sharia is a spiritual concept. It describes pretty much everything, a Muslim's relations with God in every way. So it extends to things like diet, to dress, to how you should pray, to fasting, to inheritance, all these kind of things. And
it's a guidebook on how you should behave as a Muslim.
Yeah, there's a Jewish equivalent as well called the halakha. Etymologically, what it originally meant was the path towards water. And in a 7th century desert culture, obviously, that's a pretty important path. It's a path towards salvation.
Towards the right kind of life.
Doing the right thing.
In what way is it used to interpret legal cases? I mean, how does it come in? How is it defined? How is it used in that way?
Oh well, I mean, in all sorts of different ways. I mean, obviously, we all know that in countries like Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, there are some very brutal punishments which are carried out in the name of the Sharia.
Does it specify punishments?
There are passages in the Quran which specify punishments. So interestingly, a pretty small number of passages. There are only four crimes which are said to be punishable on this earth in the Quran. Then there are traditions which are called hadiths, known to Muslims as hadiths, which say that other things should also be punished, like, for example, drinking, etc., etc. The Quran, there's big differences. There's a lot of scope for debate. The Quran, for example, says that adultery is a punishable offence. It should be punished by 100 lashes. It doesn't mention anything about stoning, but of course we know that there are Muslim traditions which say that stoning is the appropriate punishment, and there are countries which do enforce that as well. But there's a huge diversity of interpretation. I mean, one of the things that I had to do to research my book was to go through the sources, and the Muslims spent hundreds of years trying to work out what, in their opinion, God wanted them to do. And I'm not going to summarize it now, but there are literally tens of thousands of pages of interpretation of the Sharia.
We'll come back to you in a moment. I'd love to ask you, but Clive Coleman, legal affairs correspondent, what's the relationship between Sharia law and law which emanates from Westminster at the moment?
Okay, well, let's break this down a bit. Peter, if you and I had a dispute and we wanted it to be sorted out, a legal dispute, but we didn't want to go to court. We decided that we wanted it arbitrated. We could decide that we wanted it arbitrated under the law of France. We could decide we wanted it arbitrated under the law.
Well, some people come to this country to sort out their divorces, don't they? Because this is a place where they want to do it.
Absolutely. But the point I'm making is that individuals are free to arbitrate legal disputes under something called the Arbitration Act. Now, there is something called the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal, which is a form of alternative dispute resolution, which offers a forum for Muslims to go and sort out their disputes. But there'll be a tribunal. It will be a Muslim scholar. There'll also be a qualified solicitor and barrister, and they deal with divorce matters, religious divorce matters, I should say. The only way you can get divorced under the UK civil law is in the UK civil courts. But it may be the case that a woman who is divorced, has a divorce under UK law, is not considered to be religiously divorced, so she can go and get a religious divorce so that in the eyes of the community she's free to marry again. They will look at inheritance matters. They'll also deal with commercial disputes. Now that is all completely fine. That is not infringing or usurping UK law. It's running in accordance with UK law, and I think there's quite a high degree of misunderstanding there. That's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, and I'm going to listen to what Stephen Chittenden has to say, because he's been to a Sharia Council, first of all. But just before I do that, so what is a Sharia Council?
Well, there's different types of Sharia Council. Basically, Clive's mentioned arbitration tribunals, which are where people agree in advance to be bound by the decision of judges. Then there's also a thing called mediation, which is basically just counselling, and and that's what these Sharia councils are. They offer people, again, they've got to be consenting, they've got to go there voluntarily. They offer them the chance to solve their arguments in a way which is acceptable in the eyes of God, as far as Muslims are concerned.
Right, let's see what Stephen Chittenden found when he went to a Sharia Council in London.
This is the Islamic Sharia Council for the UK. It's a building in Leighton in East London, and inside is a smallish room with a table, 2 chairs opposing, and I'll explain why they're here in a second. And then on a stage above is a larger desk and a chair. This is where the scholar sits, and behind the chair is a library of books, all with Arabic on the spines, and this is all Islamic law. Umran Malik is the manager here, who's going to explain the sorts of things that go on. So first of all, we are sitting opposite each other on this table, and that is because the vast majority of what goes on here at the council regards divorce. It's women coming in for divorce, is that right?
Yes, absolutely, that's right. Majority of the clients we get is they apply for a khula, what's called Islamic divorce from a woman's point of view.
And the Islamic scholar decides what happens in that divorce.
Well, yes, he tries to get them to have a better understanding on the Islamic divorce side and see if there's any chance for mediation or not. If not, then yes.
And how does that fit in with UK law?
Well, we try to make sure that instead of it conflicting with the UK law, it complements it, because a lot of people are not comfortable on the Islamic side to go to the UK law for those things. They want an Islamic ruling on it. So for that reason, that's why we're here, to help them understand, okay, certain things you go to UK law for, whether it's child custody or financial issues which are outside of the Islamic realm.
And I understand if there's a dispute, if one side is resisting, there is a separate council where a group of scholars will sit and assess cases.
Yeah, if they cannot come to a resolution, then there's a monthly meeting with a panel of scholars, bench of scholars, if you like to call it, who make that decision as what happens with that case.
Okay. And aside from divorce, what other cases is Sharia used to deal with?
Apart from divorce, we get cases of inheritance, we get, overall family issues that they have, there's cultural issues as well that come here with having people coming for Islamic fatwa, which is Islamic knowledge advice. They ask fasting questions, regular religious questions on how to do things in a proper way according to Islam. Yeah.
And the thing is about British Muslims come from different cultures from all over the world, the Bengalis, Indians, North Africans, Pakistani. Do you find that you need to separate the culture from the religion?
Yes, it is very difficult here. For that reason, what we do have as well, we have different scholars from different schools of thoughts and from different backgrounds. We've got Bengali scholar, we've got Pakistani, we've got Indian, we've got Moroccan, we've got Arabic, so they can cover all that scope, and because they understand their culture a bit better as well.
And when I got here, it seemed busy. Are you busy?
Absolutely. I mean, as you can see, it's just been a lot of running around because unfortunately every month, you've arrived on a day when we're dealing with a lot of cases as well today, trying to make that decision what's happening with those cases. So it does keep us very busy.
So far, so reasonable.
I do think it's important to point out that all these bodies are bound by English law. They're bound by things like the Equality Act 2010, the Children's Act 1989.
Well, they're bound by them, but they operate now.
Well, I don't know, but the Jewish community, for example, has tribunals which do exactly the same thing. The Bate Din,
yeah.
The Roman Catholics.
Saying that one thing, it's no good saying that one thing is
absolutely not. No, but the thing is that the focus is always on the Muslim community. If there is evidence of it, I'm a human rights lawyer. I'm not just as a barrister, I'm a human rights barrister. If there's evidence of discrimination, if there's evidence that these powers are being abused, then it's very important that the criminal law be used against them. But I don't know of any evidence.
Also, I'm going to talk to Kola Hassan. I'm bringing in Kola Hassan, assistant judge at the Sharia Council in London. That's the one where there is discrimination against women.
I don't think so. No, I haven't witnessed any.
The fact that you charge £400 for a woman to seek an Islamic divorce and yet £200 for a man, again, that's contrary to the Equality Act.
But that's not true either. I think if you were to come into our offices and look at the cost, it's £200 for registering a case with us for both men and women. And then depending on the length of the case, because sometimes a case can be resolved in that £200, but if it's a bit longer, sometimes people want other witnesses brought in, it just takes longer, then we will add on a cost.
Well,
but the initial cost is £200 for both men and women.
On your website,
Have a look at the website.
Kola, I mean, do most of the people you see are women, are they?
Yes, about 99.9% of the women get the divorce that they ask for. It's very rare that a woman doesn't get a divorce, and generally the 0.1% that's left are women who've walked away after mediation and decided they want another attempt at
So
marriage.
what do you make of the government decision to look into Sharia courts?
I really welcome that, because that way we will stop all this mudslinging that's going on from people like Proudman. It would really help us to expose the lies that are being said about the Sharia councils. I think it would be incredibly important that we actually have some sort of investigation. Well, I know at the ISC, I can only speak for the Islamic Sharia Council because that is where I work. I cannot speak about others. I have heard from articles in the media that other Sharia councils give women a very hard time, and if that is true, then yes, we need to stop that.
So, like, what do you make of that? It's fun.
Well, I just think it's very important to remember that the only people who go before these bodies are people who go there voluntarily. If there's evidence of any coercion, that's a criminal offence, and it should be brought to the attention of the police. But no one seems to be suggesting it. They're just these vague allegations that there's discrimination. But if there's discrimination, it's discrimination against women who've voluntarily gone there. That doesn't excuse the discrimination.
I think the suggestion is that really courts like this, religious courts, and frankly other religions as well, have no place in our system. And what do you think?
I know that's a suggestion. The suggestion seems to be that the law should intervene effectively to abolish these courts.
Well, no, just that the law is the law, and that's what we live by, not by the regulations set by a religious court of any.
But the law is the law. I don't deny that. The law and all these tribunals are and should be subject to English law. That's absolutely the case. If there's any suggestion that that's not the case, then it's very important that they be regulated and the full force of the law be brought against them. The focus is always on these Muslim courts. So allegations are always being vaguely bandied about, but no complaints are made to the police. There's no evidence of any illegal act, as far as I'm concerned.
Before we let you go, what has the government actually got in mind here when we talk about when Theresa May said she's going to get going on this? What's she want to do?
Well, I think that we've heard from the debate today that the most important principle underlying all of this is that everyone has to be equal under the law. Everyone has to be treated in exactly the same way. And I think this inquiry is geared to examine whether that is actually happening. And if it isn't happening, then no doubt there'll be a series of proposals as to how it should happen. So it will look at issues like coercion. It will look at how women are treated in relation to the Equality Act. You cannot depart from...
I would, yes. Because we can stop all these rumours.
So okay.
Can I just? I mean, it was interesting when Cameron made his speech yesterday about counter-extremism measures. There was no mention of this inquiry. I suspect that this was a pre-electoral gambit by Theresa May because she was positioning herself for a leadership. That
is always possible. But it's an interesting suggestion to which we'll have to return on another day out here because the time is elapsed. But thank you very much to all of you for your company and for your patience dealing with my uninformed questions. The time is approaching 1 o'clock. It's time for afternoon edition.